Final Fantasy 14 became so forking boring, and I love forking. Thanks for self-censoring. When they added the new Relic, I much rather farm dungeons for books instead of just tomes. How are you feeling with the current state of the Relic? We know that this Friday is a good time to plug that we'll be live with the live letter 6.4. We're going to get new information, and the speculation is that we'll see bigger kind of grinds and bigger kind of investments within the Relic. But has the frustration, have you seen any of the frustration dip down yet, or are people still really frustrated by the Relic step that it was added this last patch?
I think people were just like fatigued by, we sat there and yelled at each other about a chair, and then there wasn't anything to do. And so like I think everybody's just kind of like, after a big long tantrum, we're all down for a nap right now, and we got a live letter on Friday. So like I don't think there's anything that worth being upset about right now. Live letter on Friday will tell us how big patch 6.4 is, and people will be reminded ideally how large the front half of a patch is. The point X portion. Point 4 looks to be plenty big. I think there's people that, in theory, if we look at past announcements, ideally there's people that are surprised and delighted by just forgetting. Like that would be the perfect world, right? If you're just surprised by, imagine if I told you that I was going to bring over barbecue Friday night, and then you just forgot. And then Friday night gets here and you're like, I'm so hungry. It's such a long week. And I'm like, hey, I'm here with barbecue. You're like, this is amazing. I was just thinking that. So like ideally there were people that forgot that in point 4, they said that we would be getting Criterion variant updates across this patch cycle. In point 4, we'd be getting Island Sanctuary updates across this patch cycle. In point 4, we get a new raid and a new Savage. We get a new dungeon. We get new MSQ. During the point 4 cycle, we go to FanFest. During the point 4 cycle, we get all new crafting and gathering nodes and recipes because it's an item level update, which also means there's new tome gear. There's a Moogle Tomestone event going into the point 4 cycle, which will have all sorts of other stuff. And so like ideally this just whole list of things, Hildy, Relic, all of this just is like, oh, 0.35 was just a time in my life and it's over. Like it's over now. Keep in mind that the first live letter is historically about, give or take, 60 days out for the patch. I'm predicting May 23rd for patch 6.4. It could easily be May 30th. So we still have some time, but I think the live letter helps remind you, like, there's big things right around the corner. So any frustration towards 0.35 kind of takes a step back, in my opinion, starting this Friday.
Yeah, I agree. And let's go into our next comment. Let's go and talk about Diablo. Daniel writes, do you think Diablo 4 will make a sizable dent in the potential sales and hype for Final Fantasy 14 being in the same general genre, even though it's an ARPG as a subgenre?
Do I think that Diablo makes a dent in sales for 14? No, because I don't think that the 0.4 cycle is a big sales cycle for 14. We will not yet have a pre-order button for the expansion. We'll know the name of it. We won't have our pre-order button yet. So I think Diablo 4 hype will be worn out. Diablo 4 will be looking at season 2 or 3 by the time you're in the huge sales cycle when they sell 1 million copies of, 1 million billion copies of 7.0. So I don't think it really affects it. There's always new games coming out. So there will probably be a dozen major titles that release between Diablo 4 and 7.0. And any one of those will also be kind of a valid way of draining our budget.
And Daniel clarifies that he meant 16 instead of 14, which I would say, honestly, by the time by the time 16 comes out, though, which is at the end of the month, a lot of people are going to have their fix for Diablo. The hardcore players are going to hardcore play Diablo, just like anything else. Diablo will have some more staying power, but I think by the time 16 drops, honestly, the fact that it's a PS5 exclusive, honestly, I think it's probably going to hurt the game in the longest run, because by the time it still comes out to PC, you're still missing out on the initial hype. Someone's probably already spoiled the game for you and the story for you, and you're just going to play it because you're a fan of Final Fantasy, and so it has a real risk of not picking up new players. So I think, honestly, yeah, like with the fact that Diablo is everywhere, you can play it. I played on Steam Deck this weekend.
They're two drastically different games. So I think that if you have Final Fantasy fans who love combat systems and they look at the 16 combat system and maybe it's not their favorite, they may jump into Diablo, right? So like they're two drastically different games. Yes, Diablo has a story. Yes, 16 has combat, but like one is a narrative-based single-player game. That is its dominant metric, and then the other is like, I just don't think Diablo ever becomes a narrative-based franchise. I get that there's people that like the world. I get that there's people that, but like the biggest characters, main character development is stay a while and listen, and that's it. What do we know about him? Yeah, he likes you to stay
and listen.
And like that's it. Like that's most of Diablo lore for a pretty substantial portion of the base. There are people that will play it for the story, but if you're that into new stories, you buy both games anyway.
Yeah,
you know, because you're always having to consume the next story.
Right. Izzy Pride asks, so you'd buy the same game twice just to play it in a different room? I'd buy it 10 times.
I own Final Fantasy up through Shadowbringers on PlayStation, Mac, and PC, and it's exactly the same way. I had to buy all 3 copies, and the reason I haven't moved over for Endwalker is I've been perfectly happy on my PC. But if I started traveling more or something and I wanted it on my Mac, I would have to buy a Mac copy of Endwalker so that I could play there. And if I wanted to go sit on my TV, I would have to buy it for my PlayStation.
Yeah. That's the thing I've advocated for, especially with cross save. It's like, let me continue and I'll buy the game in different spots as long as I have that option. But if you don't give me that option, I'm going to go who gives me the option. It is literally like, it doesn't bother me whatsoever, especially if I like the game.
I think that's the advantage of Xbox, is that it's all Microsoft. So I'm pretty sure I own Call of Duty on my PC. I've just never installed it because I bought it on my Xbox.
I don't think so at all, namely because they don't own Call of Duty yet. But as soon as they do, you'll probably see that same kind of thing. They have that play anywhere, buy once, you own it on PC and Xbox. That's that whole Xbox thing, which is an advantage that they have over PlayStation and an advantage that they flex outside of these lawsuits with the different regulatory bodies. Because when it comes down to it, when they were talking to them, they were like, "Oh man, we're in like last place when it comes to video games, and this is just going to help us make more competitive." But then internally, they're like, "We're counting every PC on the market as us." Like, guys, we're doing great when they're talking to their shareholders and things like that.
All right. So so the question is, do I own Modern Warfare? How can I tell? Upgrade available. Now I just want to know.
And Brian, while Chris looks this up, says, yes, I was playing Diablo 4 on Steam Deck this weekend. I got it working, but it was also having a couple of random hiccups because it's not native to that platform. There were some nice Proton experimental versions that rolled out, so I was able to kind of test those. I did not put a guide together for it because it would crash, and sometimes getting back into the game was a little bit more challenging, and so it ended up being a level of frustration that I didn't want to invite anybody into for a beta. But if this then gets more supported for the Steam Deck for launch, it's going to be a great platform. It plays great on controller. I'm very, very pleased with how Diablo 4 plays on the controller, especially for PC. But it has crossplay, cross save. So my hope now is that Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard before Diablo 4 launches on Xbox. So I've already purchased it for the Battle.net launcher. I will see if I do not have to purchase it for the console. Yeah,
I do not own it. It looks like it's only $60. Has it dropped in price?
That's probably because it came out at the $60 price. Microsoft raised the prices on console games to $70 for 2023. Well, I mean, everybody's just going up to 70, and they, honestly, it's like they held off longer than I expected that they would hold off for.
Yeah. Games were the same price from 1998 to 2018.
Yeah,
we had a good run, guys. But as soon as the ceiling broke, now they can be whatever they want.